In the history of internet gaming, there has never been a needlessly restrictive video game playthrough challenge narrated by a 20-something male with deadpan delivery and dry sense of humor. Thank you for being here to witness the first. For some reason, I thought it would be fun to see if I could beat Fallout 4 with only a walking cane as a weapon and with no armor equipped. While we look at my character creation in the background, let's go over the rules. Rule 1 is obvious. I can only use a walking cane for a weapon. Weapon mods are okay on the walking cane, and if I happen to come across one, I can use a legendary walking cane. However, I'll spoil it now and say that for my first playthrough ever, I did not encounter a single legendary walking cane. Rule 2, no armor allowed. When I first started thinking about this run, I was tempted to get a suit of power armor to make the walking cane more effective, and that's when I decided I would instead do no armor at all. Now, clothing is okay, and clothing that raises stats is okay, but nothing that provides damage, energy, or radiation resistance. Rule 3, I can pick up weapons and armor to sell, and I can equip items that can be used as weapons for quest purposes only, as long as I do not attack anything with them. We will see this with the artillery signal grenade. Rule 4, all other bonuses such as aid, including drugs, stealth boys, perks, and bobbleheads are fair game. Rule 5, the game will be played on the normal difficulty setting. And Rule 6, no intentional glitches or exploits, including abusing the construction system to level up. I named my character Donnybrook because I thought he looked like a Donnie, and then Donnybrook popped up in the autosuggest on my PS4, so I chose it. For stat build, I invested heavily in strength and agility to maximize the effectiveness of the walking cane. I took 1 intelligence, and leveling up was still going to be important, so I took enough luck to get Idiot Savant, and then I put my single remaining point into endurance for more HP. Leaving the vault, I quickly acclimated to my new post-war surroundings and returned to what was once my home. I headed immediately to the workshop to dump a bunch of stuff from my inventory so it wouldn't give me an unfair advantage in the game, ignored Codsworth, and headed into my old house to pick up the special book and get an extra point in endurance. Next, I needed my weapon. I knew that some walking canes should spawn in the Charles View Amphitheater, and from memory, I picked out roughly that destination, placed it on the map, and headed on my way. Outside of Concord, I decided that wearing my vault suit was cheating, and decided to take it off to fully honor the spirit of the run. Then I met Trashcan Carla, and this resulted in one of the most uncomfortable interactions I've ever had with an NPC.
Just looking for love, sweetheart.
Regardless, I had time to buy myself some clothes from Trashcan Carla before I had my first encounter at Drumlin Diner. Having no ability to attack anything yet, I had to rely on my abysmally low charisma skill to try to solve the situation.
I tried reasoning with her,
but it turns out she wasn't very much the reasonable type. Not only did she refuse to end things peacefully, she tried to put me up to killing the two myself, breaking my vow of only using the cane as a weapon. What I didn't anticipate is that she would then turn the gun on me. This left me with no choice but to flee the scene of a crime in progress. At Oberland Station, I met a woman who was very upset about her sister and stopped me to ask for help. But then her emotional service dog came to comfort her, so I left the two of them to it. Finally arriving at Charles View Amphitheater, where I would find my weapon, I also gained enough experience to level up. I chose Idiot Savant for my first perk, as the experience was going to be important. Weapon finally in hand, I equipped it and decided to try it against the cultists at the amphitheater. This is what we call a bad idea. But that didn't stop me from trying it a few more times, just to be sure. I decided to head back to Diamond City, and on the way found a gun shop that had the supplies I needed to create my first, and only, weapon mod for the cane I would receive in this entire run. With my weapon now as strong as it would ever be, I ran into some local wildlife, and used the opportunity to get some XP and some meat, as I figured that having access to healing items throughout the game would be a necessity for this run. At Diamond City, I witnessed some forced exposition, said hi to Deacon, and then managed to softlock the game by attempting to talk to Danny Sullivan at the exact moment Piper decided to talk to me.
Ugh, reporters.
Right.
Oh? Whatever.
Softlock successfully broken, I went into the marketplace and dumped everything I didn't need for the few medical supplies I could afford. Then I headed to Valentine's Detective Agency. I was really pretty sure I couldn't rescue Nick at my current point, but I wanted to get the quest started and also get that little bit of XP, which was just enough to push me over to the next level. For this perk, I took my first rank of Big Leagues to increase the base damage I would do with all melee weapons. In this case, that means the walking cane. I knew I would need more levels before I could take on the mission to rescue Nick, so after helping myself to the entire town's food supply, I went to see the biggest Pink Floyd fan in all of the Commonwealth. He sends you on a relatively short mission nearby to a dungeon to grab some paint, preferably the correct color green paint for the wall. Before I left town, I went to see local businessman Shen Kowalski and put Project Purity to shame by providing clean water to the Commonwealth without sacrificing anybody to a radiation chamber. I also found this NPC practicing for a Morrowind tailing mission. Finally, I stopped by Piper's office to gain some extra XP by pretending I cared about her newspaper. Hardware Town was difficult, and it resulted in a few deaths while I figured out the right way to approach it. Ultimately, I had to figure out how to kind of lure the raiders out one by one, and then take advantage of Vat's defense to kill the named raider Demo, who was by far the most difficult. It took me a couple tries, but eventually I did manage to clear the dungeon without too much hassle. Outside Hardware Town, I found a marked location apartment building and decided to check it out. Unsurprisingly, I found a raider inside, but I killed him and leveled up. Now at level 4, I took the first perk that would be a huge leap forward for ability for this character. I took the Blitz perk, which, if you're unfamiliar, allows you to attack with melee from a much greater distance in VATS. Obviously, this is a huge advantage because closing the distance on ranged enemies is a big part of melee in the game. Also, sometimes if it can't teleport you straight to your target, it turns you into a telekinetic melee user, which is kind of neat. Back at Diamond City, I returned to Abbott at the wall with the correct shade of paint and was rewarded with a finger painting lesson. Idiot Savant also activated when I turned in the quest, finishing off this level and taking me halfway to completing the next one. At level 5, I invested in Ninja for the additional sneak attack multiplier. I had a fair dinkum-thinkum about what to do next, and settled on going to visit the railroad, hoping to gain more experience and levels from their quests. Along the way, I returned to the Charles View Amphitheater to have my revenge on the cultists from before. This, as it turns out, was still a bad idea. I made it to Old North Church without any real notable trouble, entered the secret handshake, and joined the railroad. This caused me to level up, and at level 6 I took my first rank of the Ninja perk.
It's all good now. I vouched for you.
My nearest fast travel location and my meetup point with Deacon was the Drumlin Diner, and of course I had completely forgotten about the drama that had gone down there before. I forgot that Wolfgang and Simone were actually on my side and out of instinct attacked them on sight and created what is possibly one of the most hectic random scenes I've ever seen in Fallout 4. Thankfully, Trashcan Carla was there to intervene and save my life from the fight. Deacon and I ran into a man who was in desperate need of a Geiger counter, but unfortunately mine was in the shop, so I couldn't help him. However, he did still give us some useful information on our next target, the switchboard. The switchboard actually was a pretty tough target because synths deal a lot of damage to unarmored targets, and they actually can tank quite a good bit of hits, so this did not go down as easily as I would have liked it to. This is the first time I learned about the transformative power of better living through chems, and not the last time I would be tempted by their sweet embrace. The fight with the synth leader was a little difficult, and I actually died the first time, but the second time it was much easier due to some lucky placement with the enemies in the room and where my character moved due to Blitz and VATS.
Nice.
But we were able to rescue the MacGuffin and we're on our way. I also picked up some stealth boys to help us later and a mini nuke to sell. On the way out, I died several times to turrets when VATS refused to work or otherwise had severely strange glitches. Back at HQ, I handed over the fetch quest and was able to join the railroad. I didn't plan on doing the railroad ending with them, but there were still things they had to offer me. Also, Idiot Savant activated when I turned in the quest and got me 2 whole levels in a row, so that was pretty nice. I used my 2 perk skills for Big Leagues 2 and Sneak 2, a combination which should be pretty self-evident for the playstyle of this character. I sold a bunch of stuff I was never going to use to Tinker Tom in order to afford a handful of stealth boys that would help later on. It's kind of an interesting feeling playing a character where you sell pretty much literally everything because nothing of it is usable to you. But I do like that it presents a different perspective on the game. Having just gained a couple of levels, I figured now was as good a time as any to go see if I could brave the Triggermen and rescue Nick. Before I got there though, I stopped and did a Mila mission for Tinker Tom at the Boston Bugle building. I also spent way too long trying to get into this novice terminal, hoping that Idiot Savant would trigger and I would get a nice XP boost, but sadly this was a waste of time. I really thought the Triggermen were going to be much more difficult than they actually ended up being. They definitely can chew through a character with no armor, especially the ones with the submachine guns. But all in all, I found that they are actually not that perceptive and they're very easy to sneak around. In addition, they're pretty spongy themselves and they'll go down to 1 sneak attack hit or just a couple of regular hits in VATS. In this dungeon, I hit level 9 and took Rooted, a skill which I'm not sure did as much as I hoped. I grabbed Nick, and on the way out we were confronted by Skinny Malone and his gang. I let Nick do the talking, while I snuck up behind them and used VATS to eliminate the whole party with my walking cane. Before meeting with Nick, I gave Sheffield a Nuka-Cola for some easy extra experience. Nick gave me my next lead on where I needed to go, but I knew at this point in the game I really could not be ready for Fort Hagen, so I needed to find something else to do that would advance the plot and help me level up. I knew what I had to do next, but I wasn't excited for it. I entered the Museum of Freedom, completing Out of Time, and locking in my destiny to rescue Preston Garvey and the village people. I grabbed the fusion core from the basement on my way up and punished a few raiders with a switch, since Preston was unable to do it with a laser rifle. I told Preston and Sturgis that I already had the fusion core because my lizard brain decided I needed the shiny thing. And then I went and picked up the first and most useless special bobblehead of the game. I went to the roof because even though I wasn't using power armor, for some reason I decided I was going to jump down. Also, I decided to pick up the minigun just to show off that you can if you have enough strength. I don't know when I learned this, but it took me quite some time. After playing around on the roof for a minute, I realized this was a terrible idea and went to go out the front door like a properly raised person. Believe it or not, I actually had a plan here, or at least I hoped I did. Part 1 of the plan: sneak around to the Deathclaw area and enrage it, then quickly run away while it tears up the raiders present. Part 2 of the plan: get to a safe distance, wait for my time, activate a stealth boy, take every drug I had,
Fucking kill!
and get close enough to the Deathclaw to hit it with a sneak attack critical. Part 3 of the plan was improvised and involved rapidly using another stealth boy before I died a grisly death, when the first one wore off just as I finally reached the Deathclaw. This time things actually worked out a little better, as the combination of a 5-time sneak multiplier, critical hit multiplier, and all of the drugs coursing through my veins actually did pretty big damage to the Deathclaw. The VATS run left me one hit shy of killing the Deathclaw, but swinging around frantically as I came out of VATS, I managed to hit it and kill it before I could take any damage. The rest of the raiders were an easy mop-up. At level 10, I take a rank of toughness, since having no damage resistance is starting to be a little painful.
That was a pretty amazing display. I'm just glad you were on our side.
If you're familiar with the game, then you know the infamously grindy part comes next, so I'm going to start trying to get through these sections pretty fast since this video is already getting up in length.
Anyway, I am glad you're here.
Talk to Preston, stare into his eyes for an uncomfortable amount of time, and then receive an errand.
And I hope you don't mind, but I've got another favor to ask.
Do Sturgis's only job for Sturgis.
You willing to do some work?
Hey, Sturgis.
I like it.
Hey, Sturgis.
Now, this place is starting to feel like home.
Hey, Sturgis.
Thanks for doing that.
I'm here to help.
Go solve problems for a bunch of settlers that can't fend for themselves. Kill some raiders. Hit level 11 and take the next rank of the Idiot Savant perk. Do a cool top 10 anime fight scenes moment when I teleport behind this guy to kill his turret before turning around to kill him. Kill the named raider.
Yeah, I kicked their asses for you.
Inform the settlers you've solved their problem and return
You
to
know that
Preston.
settlement you sent me to help? They've decided to join the Minutemen.
That's great news. I knew you were the right person for the job.
Get a new Radiant quest from the lady who's now feeling better about her sister.
Am I ever glad to see you? We could really...
Kill some ghouls that are in no way a threat to any of the settlers. Return to Preston to find him still doing his morning
I cleared
yoga,
out the ghouls
turn
that
in
were
the
giving
quest,
that settlement
and
trouble.
level up.
Glad to hear it, General.
Find out that vicious beasts known as mole rats have taken over the Starlight Drive-In, and Preston wants you to clear it out, but decide you've had enough of Minuteman errands for a while and decide to return to Nick, whom you left hanging. And take Sneak 3 for your level 12 perk, because at this point staying undetected is about the best chance of staying alive. When I got back to Diamond City, I found that Nick was going through some things and needed a second to himself before we could continue.
Hold your horses.
Shop in safety. No synths allowed at the surplus.
Nick,
Give me a sec.
Need some custom hardware? We got a free workbench for all your modifications.
Keep an eye out, will you?
Tip sizes,
See if I can
barrels.
get this.
He also did an ocular pat-down on the lock from quite a distance away.
That's one heck of a lock. Got something to hide, Kellogg? Why don't you give it a try? Go ahead, try the door.
A gift? For me?
I failed just about every
There I
speech
go
check
again.
possible before learning that you can bribe Geneva to get the key. Somehow I never knew this and always defaulted to having to steal it
look who
to
it
get
is.
into Kellogg's house.
What brings
Turns
you
out
in
this
there,
is easier. I pressed the discreet neon button,
Well,
greeted the dog, and set out for where I knew Fort Hagen was. I stopped and played with somebody's pre-war science fair project, because smart kids know that knowledge is power. I almost failed my no companions rule when Dogmeat decided that he was going to follow me in when I did not stop to talk to him before entering Fort Hagen.
why don't you wait at home, boy?
I could go into a lot of detail about the enemies here, but I don't really think I need to. Synths and laser turrets hurt when they hit you, but they're not all that difficult to take out, and really this was kind of a slow progress through the dungeon, but it didn't give any kind of major challenge at any point. Some healing items, alcohol, and the occasional buff out were used, but I managed to get through it without any major hang-ups. I did stop to take this absolutely useless bobblehead that would benefit me in no way simply because it's a collectible and Brain told me that I needed it, but that's about the only thing of interest that happened here. I'm pretty sure this bobblehead always spawns enemies, and I took it full well knowing this. But again, I have no real explanation. It was a thing you could collect, so I kind of felt compelled to. I knew Kellogg was going to be a little bit of a problem, especially since I couldn't use VATS on him, and that was one of my major strategies. But I ended up solving this the same way I would solve almost every problem in this playthrough, which was drugs. I took a bunch of buffing drugs and a psychojet and killed him before it ran out, and then his synths were easy to mop up with VATS attacks.
All this tech. You were very...
I watched a neat air show put on by the Brotherhood of Steel, and then returned to Diamond City to briefly enter a 12-step program and get on the road to recovery.
Too many chems. Got anything that can help?
I talked to Nick to find out what was next.
So, what now?
Time to head to Good Neighbor to make use of the piece of Kellogg's brain that, for some reason, I had been keeping in my pocket all along. I seated myself in the memory lounger and prepared to speedrun some plot. Seriously, this is probably the best quality of life improvement Bethesda made, allowing you to skip the cutscenes rather than having to watch each one of them. But I made the mistake of entering the memory lounger in third person, and I was not ready for the intense battle with motion sickness I was about to encounter. Your character is invisible here, and it is nearly impossible to tell where you are on this thin, restricted path. And of course, nearly all of your action buttons are restricted, so I couldn't even switch into first-person view. I also found out that if you enter with your Pip-Boy light on, your character still projects the glow from the Pip-Boy. Totally useless information, but kind of neat. We reach the end of the ride and find out that the Institute's secret method of transportation is teleportation. We also find out that a rogue scientist has escaped and is hiding in the glowing sea, giving us our next destination. Standing at the edge of the glowing sea, I hoped my plan would work. All it consisted of was some Radix, sneak, and the occasional drug use to run away from anything strong enough to kill me. Although it was slow going and unnerving being there with no sort of protection, the plan really worked much better than I expected it would. As I approached the Children of Adam crater, I did run into a spot of trouble with some very perceptive rad scorpions and a highly irradiated area where my Radix did little to none. I basically hightailed it and had to inhale some jet to get away from a legendary rad scorpion that popped up out of the earth, but surprisingly I made it to my destination totally unharmed. There was one last obstacle on the way to Virgil's cave, a sleeping Deathclaw. In retrospect, with how close I managed to get with my sneak, I really could have just walked by and ignored it, but I chose not to. Hopped up on drugs and alcohol, I approached the sleeping Deathclaw. I was once again hampered by Vatz's total refusal to work. I don't know why this kept happening, but it was an issue that popped up a couple times throughout the run. So, instead I took the Deathclaw on with manual armed combat. I was actually surprised at how little damage the Deathclaw did to me, and I was able to defeat it one-on-one with some fancy footwork and some well-timed swings. I finally met Virgil and got to have a conversation with him, where he filled me in more about the Institute, the molecular relay, and coursers. He sent me off to find a courser, and I leveled up. I'm 95% sure I missed a level up somewhere along the way, but I can't find it in all of my footage, so we're just going to go straight to level 14. For once, there wasn't one perk that really stood out to me as being helpful, so after a little bit of debate, I took Bloody Mess just for the 5% damage bonus. I tracked the courser down to the Green Tech Genetics building, where I had been beaten to the scene by a group of gunner mercenaries. The gunners could do some damage, and you definitely have to maintain close distance with them when using melee build, but despite having to use some healing items a number of times, they really didn't pose any too significant of a challenge. There were a couple of times when PlayStation Share kind of acted up and didn't record when it said it was, and unfortunately the courser fight was one of those, so I'll just describe it briefly. It really wasn't that challenging. As usual, I took a bunch of drugs, including Jet, since he went invisible and made himself very difficult to target in VATS. The only really difficult thing about it was his tendency to use Stimpaks, which would bring his health back even more quickly than I could take it down with my cane, but after a couple of rounds of this, I eventually killed him. I also killed all of the gunners and the synth, and only after playing with the decapitated head of the synth did I realize there was a fat man laying around. Straight back to the railroad to have the courser chip analyzed. Another visit to Virgil to get the plans for the signal interrupter so I can get inside the Institute.
Everything looks good on my end.
I chose to go back to Sanctuary and have the Minutemen help me build the signal interceptor. We put it together, fired it up, and Sturgis launched me into the Institute. My first job once inside the Institute was to install the Bitcoin ransomware for Sturgis, and then it was time for me to take my automated tour of Jurassic Park, where they had spared no expense. After I met Synth Sean, the old man entered the room, and I killed him immediately to ensure that I would never have to do any Institute quests. Then, I became a whole new level of identity crisis by wearing the clothes of my dead father's son. I would now be exiled forever from the Institute, but before leaving, I committed the most heinous act imaginable. I actually forgot that you could run into enemies here, so I was a little caught off guard by combat and almost died at this point. But with some VATS use and heavy drug abuse, I was able to prevail. I laughed as I exited through the elevator in full view of their useless rage at the evil I had committed. Then I had another brief fight with a couple of synth striders. These guys are fairly difficult and tanky with their health and armor, but actually not terribly difficult to fight. Having the rank of big leagues where you can disarm opponents really comes in handy here, as it forces them into hand mode until they can retrieve their fallen weapon. This gives me enough time to jiggle them back and forth in VATS and reduce the risk from the laser weapons, since I have no energy resistance.
Terminating any hostile.
Upon exiting the Institute, I completed the Institutionalized quest and got to level 16. If I missed any perks at this point that I haven't said that I chose, it's probably either Big Leagues or Toughness. At level 16, I took the next rank of Ninja to increase my sneak attack damage.
The Institute is now our enemy.
I handed the holotape over to Sturgis and went to talk to Preston. At this point, the game becomes another endless run of Preston quests. I really hate this part about the Minutemen quest line, but it seemed like the most feasible faction because I really didn't know how I would fare in the final battle as either the Institute or the Brotherhood of Steel with this build. Before I committed myself to becoming Preston's TaskRabbit, there was something I wanted to do to increase my chances later in the game. So I fast-traveled to Goodneighbor and headed to the nearby Mass Fusion building. Inside and out, this building was swarming with gunners I would have to fight my way through, but for the most part I really wasn't too concerned about them.
Hey!
I was a little worried about this gunner commander in the power armor, but he put up about as much fight as a wet paper bag. Amazingly, I don't even think I took any buffs or drugs for this. I think he just kind of fell over. Anyway, I got the limited edition toy that I came for and left with a nice strength bonus which would help deal more damage. Detour over, I made my way to Counting Crossing to begrudgingly offer my help.
You gotta help. My father's been kidnapped.
I showed up at the Bureau of Alcohol, Drugs, Tobacco, Firearms, and Lasers where my help was needed. Immediately upon arrival, I leveled up. At level 17, I took an additional rank of Bloody Mess for the additional damage bonus. Inside, I did some more thing killing and dungeon clearing, and rescued the settler trapped inside.
Don't worry. I'm here to rescue you.
Oh my god, thank you. Let's go.
Thanks to my heroic effort, the settlers decided to join the
You should
Minutemen.
know. We've decided to join the Minutemen. You can...
Between settlements, I tested my mettle on a Mirelurk, since I knew that there would be a big fight with them coming up. What I saw was not overly encouraging. On the other hand, my terrifying presence struck mortal fear into the heart of this Raider veteran who was supposedly too strong for me.
Men send you?
Another settlement needed my help with raiders, this time at Hyde Park.
There's a group of...
Heading there to provide assistance, I ran into a Minuteman fighting an Assaultron and two gunners who talked like Assaultrons. At first I thought the lines were coming from an Assaultron who was just named Gunner for some strange reason, but no, all of the gunners had been stuck with Assaultron voice lines and voices. No matter how many things you've seen in this game, you've never seen all of them.
Commonwealth justice for you.
I showed up at Hyde Park to find both the Brotherhood of Steel and the Minutemen already engaged in a fight with the Raiders, so these guys must have been highly wanted for something. Despite the named Raider, Scuttle, using a few stim packs in a futile attempt to prolong his life for a few minutes, these guys really weren't that hard to take down. While I was on this side of the map, though, I wanted to take advantage of it and hunt down a couple more things that would help me with the end stage of the game. On the far southeast side of the map, you'll find a marked location called the wreck of the FMS Northern Star. Here, you'll find some Norwegian-speaking ghouls living on the ship. After killing their leader, I hit level 18 and took Moving Target to buff my damage and energy resistance in tough situations. If you follow all the way to the nose of the ship, you'll find a precariously balanced agility bobblehead. This is important because it would increase our sneak as well as our AP pool. But we're not done in this area of the world just yet. If you go to the rear of the ship, look off in the distance, you'll see what appears to be another beached ship. Take a Radix if you don't have any radiation resistance, and head in that direction. This ship is just off of Spectacle Island, and if you take a look around once you make it inside, you'll find the Luck bobblehead sitting on a shelf. So if you're going to come this far for the Agility bobblehead, there's absolutely no reason not to pop over here and grab the Luck bobblehead as well. I'm trying not to pack in too much extraneous detail to the video, but it's worth noting that at several points I made supply runs, such as this one to Solomon, to stock up on chems for tough battles coming up. After talking to the settlers whom I had just helped, I returned to find Preston Garvey doing his favorite activity, sitting and staring blankly at the wall. I informed him that those settlements had been taken care of, and he finally gave me the quest to go and retake the castle. On the way to the castle, I ignored the worst quest in the game.
Let me out!
No way. You might be dangerous.
No.
The first stage of clearing the castle was not incredibly difficult. The Mirelurks can take a hit for sure, and they can definitely dish a little bit of a beating, so they are a little overwhelming if they get up to you in numbers, but overall nothing crazy challenging here. I always hated how tedious this part of clearing out the castle is, having to kill all of these Mirelurk hatchlings. They don't really deal much damage, but they're a little annoying to hit. Actually, having a low AP weapon like the walking cane is a lot easier to hit them, and this would become an advantage for me in the next stage of the fight. Once the courtyard is sufficiently clear, comes what I expected would be one of the most difficult parts of this challenge, the Mirelurk Queen. I went in with an early strategy that was much like many of the other difficult encounters in the game so far. Take a bunch of drugs and a stealth boy, queue up a critical, get within range, and use a sneak attack critical comboed with the luck critical. Doing this, I could do a pretty significant chunk of damage to the Mirelurk Queen in a single hit, but the issue came when that was used up. I tried retreating to refill my critical meter, take another stealth boy, and attempt to get within range for another sneak attack. But I couldn't really get out of the caution stage enough to do a sneak attack bonus, and I ended up pretty hilariously bodied the first time I tried this. The second time I tried, I failed to get my sneak attack right off the bat, so I assumed that this run was totally doomed. But I kept going because you never know what will happen when you hang in there. After failing more sneak attacks, I decided I really couldn't count on them because after the initial, they just really weren't reliable enough, and it was hard to be hidden enough to ensure that I could get them. But it seemed that doing a VATS round, especially with a critical, led to me doing pretty consistent damage, if not minor. So it turned into a game of attrition. Do a full VATS round, escape before I take too much damage, heal and regain AP, find weaker enemies to grind criticals off of in VATS, and repeat the process. Once I had this pattern on lockdown, it only took me a couple more cycles of engagement with the Queen to finally kill her with a manual melee blow. After I turned in the quest, I leveled up again and took another rank of toughness to increase my damage resistance. After I slept for 3 days straight, Ronnie Shaw showed up and wanted me to clear out the tunnels underneath the castle so we could retake the artillery. Down here is a pretty strong sentry bot named Sarge, who I really thought was going to be an issue, but it turns out I had nothing to worry about. With the right buffs, I got some crazy special stats.
You're tuned to Radio Freedom, voice of the Minutemen.
I built an artillery piece and it was time to test it. For the first and only time this run, I equipped and used a weapon which was not the walking cane. I don't consider this a failure since nothing was impacted by the hit and it's quest related, but if you do, feel free to chastise me for my choice of factions in the comments. It was time to return to Preston Garvey, but unfortunately he had yet more errands for me to run, as he needs you to help a ridiculous number of settlements before you can advance the main quest line.
She's something else, isn't she?
One of these saw me going to Easy City Downs, which was a nice change of pace, because I was able to break into this building here and activate all of the robots, including the dormant ones, to turn on the raiders. They totally overpowered the raiders, but I joined in and got a few kills with the walking cane myself. I served justice to eager Ernie with a swift caning. Then, I stepped outside for a final salute of the robots who had served me so well, before I sent them to a better place.
Passing that settlement.
I returned to Preston to tell him the good news, but I still had not done enough for him, so this time it was off to Saugus Forge to help Finch farm. I found that some of the forged, especially the ones with the skulls by their name, were quite tanky and could take a hit. Also, if I couldn't get close enough to them to hit melee distance, they could severely tear me up with their flamers. I killed one and leveled up to level 20. Here, I took a rank of luck training so that I could later invest in the critical banker perk. You pretty much know the drill. Inside, I killed more people.
God damn it! I need covering fire! And finally made it to face off against Slag, who might actually have been the hardest single fight I had in the entire run. I died several times here. What you want?
I finally got unbelievably lucky when I was in VATS when something massive blew up. I'm still not quite sure what this was, but the VATS defense allowed me to tank it while everybody present died from the explosion. Unfortunately, this included the kidnapped settler. I returned to Sanctuary to find Preston sitting all alone in a closet, whistling quietly to himself. I informed him of the news, and finally I had met the criteria to progress. I learned that the Institute was planning an attack on the castle, and I needed to be there to defend it. I said that Slag was the hardest single fight of the run, but defending the castle was a long, continuous fight, and this was brutal. I have no natural defense to energy weapons, and the synths come in large numbers. They quickly overwhelm all of the Minutemen, leaving me to fight by myself. And perhaps the absolute most difficult part of this are the coursers, who will use stealth boys and therefore are nearly impossible to attack in VATS until you can get them to lose their stealth. After a couple frustrating deaths, I knew I wasn't ready to finish this mission, and I needed to do some more grinding and preparation, so I ran, and it turns out the battle will just last forever until you come back to finish it, so that was convenient.
I knew there were a couple more things scattered around the world that could help me, so I set out on a mission to collect them. First, I headed to the Poseidon energy plant. Also, just to note, although I missed it in the game capture, I did hit level 21 and at this point had taken a rank of critical banker. Unfortunately, after clearing the roof of Poseidon Energy, I realized I was an idiot because you can't get in this way if you don't have a very high science skill. So, I had to go all the way back down and enter through the pipes at the bottom. This is the entrance here if you need a point of reference. Below, you'll have to fight your way through some more of my favorite enemies, the Mirelurks. Once you make your way upstairs, you can open a novice terminal and open the security doors and face off against the raiders that are camped up here. Make it to the top and you'll find a room full of some pretty tough raiders, but nothing we can't handle at this stage. And in here is an endurance bobblehead which will increase our max health. After this, I did a Mila mission for Tinker Tom, and I hit level 22 when I turned it in. This time I took the next rank of the Rooted. Returning to Diamond City to stock up on supplies, I found out that Mayor McDonough was a synth who had shot Danny Sullivan. Perk. So I beat him to death for the EXP. I dropped by the Boston Commons for an easy Grognak the Barbarian to increase my critical hit with melee weapons. And also Hubris Comics for a comic book of the Unstoppables. I'll be honest, for some reason I thought this was a flat damage reduction, not a 1% chance to avoid all damage, so it wasn't super useful, and I don't know if I would have gone for it if I had known what it actually did. I did take the opportunity to grind against some more feral ghouls, though. I stopped at Trinity Tower to rescue Strong and Rex, but not because I cared about them. There was a melee bobblehead here that would also increase my critical attack damage with melee weapons by an additional 25%. I went back to Sanctuary to grab and make some supplies, and just as I arrived, I picked up the smallest amount of XP that brought me to level 23. Here, I took another rank of Critical Banker, although I briefly debated over getting the next level of Sneak instead. I also grabbed the Grognak that for some reason I missed at the beginning of the game, and headed over to a chemistry station to begin mixing as many high-strength drugs as I could. Now it was time to head back to the castle, where I found them still engaged in a perpetual firefight. This was still a very intense and difficult battle, but with all the preparation done, I managed to finally pull it out in the end.
It was a tough fight, but I knew the Minutemen were up to the challenge. You got...
After successfully defending the castle, Preston tells me that Sturgis has found a way in the Institute, and it's time to bring the battle to them. So, I go to talk to Sturgis and receive the plan. I decided to do a little bit more preparation, just so I don't get all the way inside the Institute and find out I can't handle it, and then have to go back on the save. At level 24, I have another minor perk debate, at first thinking to go moving target, in case I have to run past lasers, but instead picking that 4th rank of Sneak. I find another Grognak comic I forgot about at Backstreet Apparel while I'm in the process of doing another Mila mission for Tinker Tom, just to try to gain an extra level or 2 before I head in. I turn in the Mila mission, unfortunately don't gain another level, and stop by Dr. Carrington to make my last purchase before the end of the game. Finally, I find the water pipe that leads into the Institute and embark on my final quest of the game. There's really not much to say here other than you sneak through the tunnels and kill some enemies. Emerging in the Institute proper, I take the time to teleport everybody in and receive the final parts of the plan and the fusion charge. The enemies inside are tough, but for the most part not terrible. I generally just have to avoid the laser turrets and find a place where they can't hit me, as some of them are really difficult, if not impossible, to hit with just the cane. I do end up with the irritating death or two, but for the most part I make pretty steady and consistent progress. In this room, I activate a SentryBot prototype and pop a Stealth Boy to stealthily bypass this area while the synths are distracted by fighting the SentryBot. In the bioscience lab, I decide to take on the Harambe clone in order to break the cosmic chain of events that has punished us all. But I underestimated his strength, and this turned out to be a bad idea, so I tucked my tail and ran. There's not much to say about this part, so I'm just going to do another montage of killing all the security forces before the elevator unlocks. I reach the director's terminal and lift the security lockdown. At this point, I decide I'm tired of being Preston's errand boy, and I refuse to enact the evacuation protocol before leaving. As I head towards advanced systems, I level up to level 25, and at this point I take a rank of better criticals to do more critical hit damage. Almost at the reactor now, I play a game of leapfrog with a couple of laser turrets lined up along the wall. I head into the final part of the reactor room, expecting it to be an incredibly intense fight. It is a little hectic, and shots are flying everywhere, but it's really not as difficult as I expected it would be. As I stated earlier, one of the biggest enemies are the laser turrets, and it's not until near the very end of the fight that I find out I actually can hit some of them by targeting them in vats. With the enemies cleared out, I open up the reactor and I plant the charge. Sturgis teleports us back, and the Institute plays a dirty trick on me by trying to send out a robot that looks like my son to escape and infiltrate the rest of the Commonwealth. I do the right thing and deny. We teleport to the roof of the mass fusion building. Looking out over the Commonwealth, I activate the detonator and beat the main quest of Fallout 4 with only a walking cane and no armor. But all is not well in the Commonwealth.
You're noticing all the chaos.
No. We were there to destroy the...
My God. So we just killed everyone? This is gonna be a black mark on the Minutemen forever. As glad as I am that the Institute is gone, this wasn't the plan. Damn it, General. You've dragged us down to their level. It didn't have to be this way.
Not only does this news infuriate Preston, but it seems like it's actually torn at the fabric of the universe. For no reason whatsoever, my weather vane quest failed, and I got a new Mila out of nowhere. The nuclear option quest still says I need to talk to Preston to complete it, but he's locked in a dialogue loop that I can't seem to get him out of. Fast traveling back to Sanctuary, now the nuclear option decides that it does want to complete, and I get another huge burst of XP. Trashcan Carla's Pack Brahmin is now living on the roof of my house, and then I hear a massive commotion and find a Deathclaw in Sanctuary attacking June Long. And with that comes the incredibly cursed ending to my first Fallout 4 challenge. I want to thank everybody for watching, especially if you've made it this far. At no point did I intend for this to be an hour-long video. I don't know if I'll keep doing videos like this. I'll be honest, the editing was intense, like 3 straight days of editing on this, and I think my time is probably better spent elsewhere. So I don't know that I'll do a lot of these unless I get some absurd inspiration. However, some of that does depend on how the video do. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that in there, how the video do. So if you like it, and if it gets a lot of engagement and people are interested, maybe I will do more. If you want to see more Fallout content, I'd love to see you subscribe. I also have a Twitter. The handle is @NoctumAd, as in @NoctumMedia. As always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.